Okay, for today for server, we're going to go through chapter 3. We're going to be following along directly out of the book. Very little extra discussions, be more or less step by step. If you want to follow along and try to follow with me, that's great. There will be different times for breaks or to, sort of catch up. But I'm going to be concentrating on, pretty much just going through the lab activities and making sure you understand that. There's a couple of them that, get through. We'll work through it together. Okay, so starting with the material, I do want to take a snapshot before I'm working on this stuff. So I'm going to do a couple extra snapshots. Hang on. Okay, and again, why we're creating a pre-chapter 3 is because we're going to be installing Active Directory today. And once you do that, it's not one of those things that you just uninstall. We'll be creating organizational units, a test organizational unit, a couple test users, a test group. And instead of deleting all that stuff, you just go back to pre-chapter 3 at some point, and then you'll be able to redo all these activities. Again, they're directly step-by-step, word for word, option for option out of the textbook, so we can can do it again. Your snapshot manager is probably going to look different than mine just because of how I branched mine off. Yours will most likely be a straight line, so don't worry about that. Okay, moving on then, let me start up my server, power on my server. And I will talk a little bit at the beginning of Chapter 3 about Chapter 3. It says, describe the role of the directory service in the physical and logical Active Directory structure, and then it gets installing Active Directory. You read through this, so hopefully you have some idea of it. They have sort of introduced it in the previous chapters as well, but Windows Server 2008 Active Directory is the core components in the domain environment. Its role provides a single point of user, desktop, and server administration. So you're administering people who can log on, what they can do, and the computers within the domain. What can that computer do? What can't that computer do? And then the servers within your network environment as well. How do I manage all those? The next paragraph, under role of directory services, a network directory service, as the name suggests, stores information about the computer network and offers features for retrieving and managing that information. Essentially, it's a database, and that's exactly what it is. It's one big database. Users are an entry, computers are an entry, policies are an entry, and then you have the attributes about them. Working with domains, we have domain controllers. Windows Active Directory Server brings them all together. You can manage them from a single point, so it's a central point. A couple aspects about the directory services, about Active Directory specifically, in the bottom of page 76. It's a hierarchical organization. It's just like a file structure. So for every folder, you can have subfolders. We also even work with the tree, forest, domain concepts, and that's hierarchical as well. So stuff fits in and under other stuff. It is centralized but distributed database. It's centralized where it's centrally controlled and managed. It's a single point of control. However, really underlying it is distributed as well. So if I have offices in Chicago and Shanghai, the people in Shanghai are not literally physically logging into the Chicago server. It's going to be distributed in that there's going to be a domain controller over there as well. Everything's synced and still done through one Active Directory interface, so I control all those people in one place, but the underlying structure is in fact distributed. It's scalable. I can be small. I can have a 2-person network, and that's what we're creating today. Test user 1 and test user 2. There's your network. We have one organizational unit. We don't even have to really even create that, but we could have it large. We could have it multinational, have groups or domains for different regions of the world. We could having organizational units then breaking up by departments, and go multiple levels deep, multiple levels wide. It's very secure, fine-grained security. When we get to group policy objects at the end of the chapter, you're going to see how detailed you can get. It's very flexible. It does come predefined with a lot of structure, but it's also flexible that application developers and system developers can add to this. They can inject their own stuff into that database. And it uses policy-based administration, so it can define policies to ensure a secure and consistent environment for users. yet remain flexible to apply different sets of rules for different departments' locations. So in the factory location, you can't do this with your computer, but in the research area, you can for whatever reason. It talks about the physical structure. It's a site. It's nothing more than a physical location where the domain controllers communicate and replicate information. And then the logical structure are the things that we really interact with, what we see in the software. We work with organizational units, domains, trees, and forests. If you look on page 78, there's a good picture of two organizational units. And if we think of an organizational unit, we think of it as a structure within the company, within the org chart. It could be a department, the sales organizational unit. Inside the sales organizational unit, we have people like Bruce and Carrie. And we have computers like computer 1 and computer 2. We have server, we have a printer, and we have a group of people. And those are the objects that we'll be working with. A domain is Active Directory's core structural unit. It's actually grouping organizational units together. And now, domain is actually defined by its domain name. In the book, they're using coolgadgets.com, so that would be your domain. Here at LTC, if you go to ltc.edu, that's a single domain. In that domain, I have multiple organizational units, and I could have everything in that single domain. I do not have to branch out from there. However, Cool Gadgets might have, child domains or children domains. One could be, and that'd be anything in front of the domain name. So instead of coolgadgets.com, I have us.coolgadgets.com or uk.coolgadgets.com. Those are your subdomains or your children domains underneath your parent domain of Cool Gadgets. They're going to have their own organizational units under there. It's going to be unique. It's going to be defined, possibly the same structure, possibly different structure, but they are separate. So a marketing organizational unit in uk.coolgadgets.com is different than a marketing organizational unit in the coolgadgets.com parent domain. So that sort of all works together. Domains is the biggest structure. If we think of a domain, if we think of a king's domain, it goes to the river, to the mountain, to the forest. It's a very set boundaries. This is where my rule extends to, up to that point. And that's where it becomes really important later on when we work with group policy objects. They work within a domain. So it applies to this region. And in, the royal feudal times, we think of a geographical area. In this case, it's talking about these are the organizational units that these apply to. This is the object that they apply to. It does not scale beyond them. It's very defined. Then we get, I skipped a page. Here we go. On the next page, page 80, that structure, like coolgadgets.com, would be a tree. And if it kind of looks like a Christmas tree, we have a point, and then underneath there's two, so it gets bigger and bigger. So that would be a tree. We can have more than one tree in a forest. And in our forest, most of the time we have more than one tree, otherwise we call it a tree. We don't call it a forest. Even with two trees would become a stretch. I have a forest in my yard. I have 3 trees. No, it doesn't quite work that way. But if, in fact, you had, in this case, they have coolgadgets.com and niftytools.com, it could be they're managed under the same area. They could, in fact, be under the same parent company. They could have merged. They could just operate separately for whatever reason. It's having, that's another separate domain. And so that domain and its subdomains or its children domains is going to be its own tree. Cool Gadgets is going to be its own tree. That whole encompassing area is a forest. So if you kind of go good with forests and trees and organizational units, okay, that's the main divisions that you'll be looking at. We're going to be working within a domain. And we're starting off with just a single domain, and we'll be creating just a single organizational unit within this domain. By the way, this chapter today is just getting Active Directory installed and letting you see what it does a little bit. And it introduces you to organizational units, groups, groups, users, those kinds of things. There are separate chapters on that. In fact, next week we'll be working with, users and groups. Nope, next week is organizational units. So we'll be spending a week on organizational units, and then 2 weeks from now we'll be working with users and computers accounts. So we'll be focusing a lot more on these in the future. This is just a quick introduction. Questions? Okay, so the first activity is on page 81, and it's installing Active Directory domain services. It's very similar to installing Windows Server itself. The installation itself is pretty straightforward, and then when you come back into it, that's when you do a little bit of configuration. So I'm going to log in and just follow the steps right in the book here. I'm going to log in with a Control-Alt-Insert. I'm going to switch my screen to full screen, Control-Alt-Enter, so I don't have the extra menus and things on here. I get rid of my VM toolbar as well by making sure that this is not selected, the little pin up in the corner. And so it's just a nice, clean server. My password, I'm sure you've been using this throughout the week, so you keep practicing every day. If not, last week was a really long time. The password is capital PASSWORD01. Or it should be. If you thought you would be cool and want to do it your own way, great. Hope you have your password written down. If not, there's not a lot you can do about that. Okay, first of all, what's coming up is the whole initial configuration tasks, and it comes up every time until you check the little box down the corner that says, do not show this anymore. And we are done with it. We did the things we need to do, which were these top couple items, the time zone, my default IP, my static IP address, my server name, and then my work group name. So I'm going to close that and not have it come back up anymore. Now, the next thing that does come up automatically is Server Manager, which is great. I mean, because we do a lot of stuff in Server Manager. In fact, that's one thing we'll be starting with is under Roles. So if I click on Roles up here, it tells me that I have 0 of 17 installed. Now, some of you may have 0 out of 16. Somebody have 0 of 16? Does anybody else have 0 out of 17? So you have something installed already.
That's probably from last week.
Okay, so some of you have 1 of something installed there for file services from the other activities. Okay, that's fine. We're going to be working with this role for adding a role, though. So I'm going to click Add Role. And there we go. A couple of little message saying that, before you continue, verify that the administrator account has a strong password. And technically, capital P password 01 falls under a strong password. It has capital and lowercase and letters and numbers. I'm not sure if it's really a good one or not, but just make sure that your IP addresses are all set and make sure you have all your security updates and that kind of stuff. So you can skip this in the future if you want. I'll keep it up there so it stays consistent, so we look at the same way every time. But you really don't have to see that anymore. So click Next. And the service we're looking for is the Active Directory Domain Services, the second option on there. And we call it ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services. I click on that, and I click Next. And a couple things to ensure. It requires this and that and whatever. So I click Next. And it says your server might need to restart after it's completed. So okay, I can do that and click Install. It takes a couple minutes to do this. By the way, this is, when we talk about domain controllers is where it's physically existing. you really should be having multiple domain controllers because this is where people log in. If you have a single box and it goes down for whatever reason, no one can log in. If no one can log in, they can't really do anything at all. We only have a single server at this point, so we can only have a single domain controller. Yes, you have to check the checkbox next to the Active Directory Domain Services, and then you can click the install. When you're all done here, you can click Close. And it says that it's been installed. So let you catch up here. Okay, if you're all caught up here then, again, you may have file services on there, and we'll worry about that later on. But right now, you make sure you have Active Directory Domain Services. I can go ahead and close this, and I want to go and I want to run the command DC promo. It's a domain controller, and I want to promote this domain controller. Right now, it's just a regular domain controller, and I want to promote it to kind of the master. So I just type in DC promo, and it is an actual program. It's not a command prompt command, so I can just run it right from here. I don't have to go to command prompt first. So I DC promo, and it's checking if actually Active Directory Domain Services are there. And the wizard helps you install Active Directory Domain Services, or ADDS, on this server, making the server an Active Directory Domain Controller. And we click Next. The next screen, it just says that Windows 2008 domain controllers have new features. Therefore, older versions of stuff won't be compatible, so it's just a warning message. At this point, you can say, oh no, and run away, and hit cancel, or click next. So I'm going to click next. If you already have a forest going on in your environment, you should be joining it. You should not be creating multiple forests. You want to be controlling it in one large area, and you just be adding to it. We have no other trees or forests, so we'll be creating them right now. So this new domain is going in a new forest. And so remember that picture in the book, so here's our forest. The tree is sort of that combination of domains, and now I'm creating that domain in a brand new forest. So you need a name for the forest. So FQDN is a fully qualified domain name, and it could be really creative and fun. The book tells you to use Windows 2K for 2008 Active Directory, and then your machine number, which everybody's machine number is 10.com. I don't know, I like Google.com or CNN.com, W2K8AD10.com. It doesn't make much difference. I'm just doing it the way the book says it. It is not case sensitive ultimately when we use things. W2K8, which is Windows 2008 Active Directory. 10, everybody's 10.com. Windows 2008 Active Directory 10.com is our fully qualified domain name. And I click Next. It's seeing if the new forest name is already in use, saying, oh, you can't use that. I already have one of those on my network. Now you have a forest functional level. Sounds kind of complicated. Basically, you're saying what feature levels are we working with. Realize the higher the feature level, the less compatible it is. You can only work with other devices at your same level or if they are higher. So if you're saying 2000, this is actually minimal. So that means it's going to be minimal functionality. Well, that's a little exaggeration. It's got the least amount of features, but it's the most compatible. So it's going to work with 2000 servers, 2003, 2008, 2012. All those servers are going to work with that. We're working exclusively with Windows 2008. That's the whole point of the class. And so we don't have anything else to worry about being compatible with. So we're going to be using a 2008 functional level. That's going to give you the most current features, however, the least compatible. It's not going to work with Windows Server 2000 or 2003 servers anymore, or domain controllers specifically. So our functional level is 2008, and we click Next. Select the additional options for this domain controller. It also needs to be DNS. DNS is going to resolve our names to IP addresses. It's going to manage all that for us. And so we're going to be leaving that as the default and then click Next as well. I get this message saying the computer has dynamically assigned IP addresses. I'm thinking it's grabbing my IP version 6 address off my NIC because I only have one NIC and it definitely has a static address. So I will let the computer use a dynamically assigned IP address, which is not recommended, but it lets me do it. It says that there's a problem. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. Okay, location for the databases. Remember, Active Directory is a database, and it's global. We can manage users in Florida as well as in France. However, we need to have it physically exist somewhere. And so it's a specific directory and a specific file, server somewhere. And right now it's putting it in my local C drive. That is the default. We're going to leave it that way for class. It may not be the best configuration. In fact, it even says for better performance, databases and log files really should be in different volumes. And they should be on like RAID volumes and redundant and maybe someplace else or whatever, really high-speed stuff. And even partitioning, having it in your Windows operating system folder for something as complex and something as critical as Active Directory, you may want to think about that. But we're going to choose it this way anyway. So I click Next. Now it's asking for a password. This is for the restore mode administrator password. Assign a password for the administrator account that will be used when this domain controller is started in restore mode. So we're going to use the same password. You're not typing this in to match your administrator password. In fact, this is a different account completely. We are using the same password, but just realize there are two different functions. You have administration under the administrator account, and this is how you get in if in your restore mode of Active Directory, of directory services. So I click Next after doing password. I can take all these settings and export them if I want to an answer file, so I can use them later on. Or I can just, verify them. Yeah, it looks good, looks good, and I click Next. This takes a few minutes. So the wizard configuration can take from a few minutes to several hours. It does not take several hours. It takes a few minutes, though. And at the end, it says that you should reboot your computer. You can also click the little checkbox that says reboot when it is done, so I don't have to click the reboot button. And you can just walk away, and when you come back, you should come back to the login screen. So this would be a good time to take a break. If you want to take a break now, go ahead. And then, like I said, ultimately, when we come back, you should be back at the login screen. Any questions or problems up to this point? Okay. It's working. So when you're all done, your computer should reboot. Come back to the Control-Alt-Delete login screen. Do Control-Alt-Insert to log in. If you notice, the login screen does look different. Instead of logging into the machine and your username, you're now logging into the domain and the administrator. So this account now is on the domain. When you switch your computer from a computer to a domain, you no longer have local users. So that whole control panel users thing doesn't apply. They actually don't exist anymore. The only users are the users in the domain. So just be aware of that. So if I go ahead and log in, my same password, it did transfer that user over from a local user over to a domain user. So, and kept the password. And I have password 01. By installing Active Directory, this finished coming up. By installing Active Directory, it added additional MMCs under the Administrative Tools menu item on the Start menu. So Start, Administrative Tools. Now you can see you have a couple extra things. You have Group Policy Manager for one, Active Directory Users and Computers, Active Directory Sites and Services, Domains and Trusts, and I don't know, there's probably some other ones in here as well. So Now that you've installed your Active Directory, you can examine the types of objects it contains. And that's kind of what we go through in the next activity, in fact. Yeah, we'll just go on to the next activity. Activity 3-2 on page 85, exploring Active Directory container objects. There are some good pictures of what the objects look like on page 84. A site, a domain, a folder, an organizational unit, groups, users, and computers. By the way, organizational units and folders look the same. It's going to look like a little manila folder with a tab on it and everything. The organizational unit is different in that it has like a little additional icon, like of a book on it, like a phone book directory on there. A lot of people get these confused, especially if you don't name your organizational units with an organizational unit name, like test OU for test organizational unit. If you create an organizational unit called test and a folder called test, they're going to look alike. And you're going to say, I just did that. Or I'm going in here and I'm seeing people. Shouldn't I be saying files, or vice versa? I'm seeing files. You really have to keep it mentally apart. We use different tools to administer them, so that should help a lot. But just understanding of what you're working with. If I'm working with an object, I'm working with people. And I'm sorry, if I'm working with an organizational unit, I'm working with people, computers, objects. If I'm working with a folder, I'm working with files and folders. So they can be named the same and look the same, but they are different. Okay, moving on. I can close Server Manager. We're not going to do that right now. We are going to go to the Active Directory Users and Computers option under the Administrative Tools. So clicking on Start, Administrative Tools, and then over to the Active Directory Users and Computers. Click on the domain object on the left, which would be over here. Here's your domain object, which is w2kad99.com. And I am under View Details right now, so that's fine. So I can see their names and all these different objects there. Let's see here. If I right-click on the domain object, I can go down to Properties, and you can see the name. The domain name is that domain name, the description, and you can type in a description if you want. And I think it actually has you do this. Yes. Windows Server 2008 domain 10. This doesn't do anything, by the way. You don't have to fill this in. It doesn't add functionality, take functionality away, anything. It's just purely a descriptive field. And I can click OK then. If I expand the domain, I can actually see things over here on the right side already, but if I expand the domain, I can see I have different categories underneath here. One is built-in. If I click on the built-in, these are the users that are created when they're built, that were created during the installation process. I think they even have you, I guess that's later. If I go to the computers folder, they're going to show the computers that I'm actively controlling. None of them have joined the domain. So I have a domain and I have users that have been created, but I haven't had any computers specifically join the domain. And we'll take a look at that in a different chapter, not even today. Domain controllers is the next one. We have a domain controller, which is Server 10. And that's our default first site name. Let's see here. And if I click on, let's see, right-click the domain controllers, OU, and click Properties. So if I go to Properties again, it gives me information about it. I have an option up on top to even show Managed By. So I'm the administrator, I can manage this, but if I wanted to have somebody else manage this, I could as well. You know, Tony, who's not an administrator, he can manage this domain. Not exactly sure why, they just want to point that out to you. And I'll hit cancel on there. If I click on the users, these are users that, again, some have been created and some you create. And that's all they're showing at this point, is just showing that they're there. It shows groups as well. So the groups are the ones with 2 people on it. The single people are the individuals, the users. Viewing some of the default leaf objects on page 87, you can view the properties of a variety of leaf objects. You want to learn more about the objects, so you view the properties by several default objects. It says log in and get the Active Directory users and computers, MMC running, which we're in. And we want to go to the built-in folder. Yes. Okay, we're in the built-in folder. These are the things that are objects that are there. If you notice, there's an administrators group. Let me click on this little over here to bring it wider so I can see the full names. There's an administrators group. If I right-click on it and go to properties, or just simply double-click on it, it brings up, the description about it. Administrators have complete and unrestricted access to the computers and domain. You'll have group scope. Now, scope is how far does that group work? And right now it says built-in local, which is exactly it is. It's built in. A lot of times we make our groups as just global, that's the default, and then universal will span trees as well. Group type is security, almost all the time. In fact, everything that we're working with would be a security group because we're working with what they can and cannot do. That's security. A distribution group actually has to do with email. Why that's in here, not sure, but that's where it is. So you can make distribution groups here as well. This is a built-in group. You can't change these. I cannot change any settings in here because this is built in. If I look at members, I can see who the members are. And the members are the administrator user and other groups. So you can have a group member of another group, and then whoever's inside of there is going to have, administrator's access as well. If I were to go up here and click remove, I'd be removing the administrator account, and I would have nobody to administer my server anymore. So be careful of managing things. One of the first functions that you should be doing when creating a server is creating a backup administrator and putting them in there and securing them, however you want to do that. I'm not getting into the details of that right now, but just think of that. Have a backup administrator account. Okay. I'm not even sure what I'm supposed to be showing you. Administrators, click properties, the general tab, members tab. Oh, not only in addition to members, you can also find out what you're a member of. So these are the people and groups that are part of me, but who am I a part of? So just like right now, domain admins would be a member of administrators. Well, is administrators part of another group? And I can click on members of, and I'm not. So we're not choosing administrators as a group into another group. Managed by, the same thing we talked about before. Who can manage this? Not a real typical scenario that we'd be doing that. Going over to domain controllers. Domain controllers, I can see only have one. We should have multiple domain controllers, ideally. Not every server should be a domain controller, but you certainly should have enough for fail-safe and for just even load balancing and, faster access, especially having them locally, geographically local to the users. If I double-click on the server, it brings up its properties, and it also has a description field. I always forget which ones they have us change and which ones not. It just says that it can be changed, so you can type what it is. I don't think it actually has you changed anything. The next one is the operating system. What operating system? I'm running Windows Server 2008 Enterprise, and I'm running Service Pack 1. By the way, how many of you have Service Pack 1? How many of you do not have Service Pack 1? That'd be an either-or situation. Either you do or you don't. You can't, none of the above. We'll move on. I'm just wondering if that's the difference between 17 roles and 16 roles. I'm not sure. it's not going to make a difference. So operating system, we also have a member of. So the server, who's it a member of? It's a member of the domain controllers group. So we have a group called domain controllers, and all of our DCs, we call them DCs, our domain controllers are a member of that. Which, by the way, when I first started working with Windows Server, it was very confusing because they kept talking about DCs. Like there's a DC here, DC there. Do you know what I was thinking of? A distribution center. I came from a manufacturing, background. Not background, but that's the company I worked with. They talk about the DC all the time, and just that transition was, it's like, I get it. A distribution center. Okay, if I close this up, I have, what else is left here? Member of, I can go to users and have the administrator user. So I can double click on the administrator user, and we can actually type in a name for here. And for our example, they're having us type our name in. I would not recommend this, by the way. Administrator really should just be administrator. If Paul Benfield should have an account, Paul Benfield should have an account. Now, Paul Benfield might be part of the administrators group, but really should be separate. So I'm not going to debate with them or whatever. It's just a practice scenario. But Paul should not be called administrator. Paul should be called Paul, so you can easily identify who's who. What's that? No, that's different. It's still being called administrator. It's always being administrator. It's, I don't know, some list, how it's going to show up or whatever. This doesn't even matter if you put anything in here. It really doesn't. So don't worry about that too much. But you can put optional information in there. If I click under the account tab, this is where you can specify the user logon name, the login restrictions, and account options. Okay, a couple things on here. Well, we're not going to worry about that part. Here's a really important button, though. Unlock the account. If it's locked for security reasons, like password and intruder detection type things, this is where you unlock it. And a lot of people don't think of looking into their account, and that's where it's going to be. This is also where you have a lot of other account options, like you must change the password at the next login. That, by the way, is the default if you were to change somebody's password. So if I changed your password, that would normally get checked to say, hey, change it to the next time, because you shouldn't know what their password is. Or another option is user cannot change the password. Can't think of great reasons for doing that other than some systems require logins. I used to be an email administrator as well, and the email system actually logged into its various servers to make the connections, so it needed a username and account and password. You don't want those passwords changing, or somebody going in here is like, oh yeah, let me change the password. It stops working, and then you have to figure out where, why, oh, the password changed, or something like that, because it's actually coded in and configured, so you don't want to do that. You can put a password never expires. It's that one user who just can't remember their new password ever. So we'll just let you keep it forever. It's supposed to expire after 2 months or 3 months, but again, I can't think of great reasons for doing that. Store password using reversible encryption. I don't know. Account is disabled if a person goes on vacation or whatever. I shouldn't be going through all these because that's 2-week stuff. We're going to go through user accounts. But that's where you change all that. Okay. I lost my step. Let's see, 10, 15, member of. Did I do that one already? This user for an administrator is part of the administrators group. It's part of the domain admins, the domain users, enterprise admins, group policy, creator owners, and schema admins. So I'm part of a lot of different things. So it'll be kind of important, I'm sure. Let's close this and we go to the guest account. We're going to notice the guest account has a little black down arrow next to it. That means under account that the account is disabled. I really wish they didn't have the scroll bar here. I wish they would just made the box just a little bit bigger, or else You know, you already have 15 tabs. What's wrong with one more tab? I really do not like scrolling to see that my account is disabled. I like to look at the account and just see it checked. Well, you can see it through the little icon, but still, it'd be nice to have a little bit more straightforward. I wouldn't want to change the order because I'm looking for that object the same place every time. But that might be an idea, something to make it a little bit easier. Or a big red X, like a big symbol. Here's, look at all this real estate right here, you know. Put something there. Steve Ballmer did not, you know, ask for my ideas on this one. And so I should send him an email to say, hey, this is what I think. You know, we're not changing anything. We're not changing it. We're just showing you that's one thing that's underneath there. And we're going to be spending, like I said, a whole week on each of these different things, like user counts and computers and organizational units. So I probably went way deeper than I should have. But anyway, creating a new object in Active Directory on page 89, activity 3-4, isn't too difficult. It's very much like working with Windows Explorer. If I was going to make a new folder, what's one way of making a new folder? Right-click, and I'm going to do it right on my domain because I want to create it in my domain. I right-click, I go to New, and I want to make an organizational unit. As you notice, there's no folder option on here because we're not in the file system. We want to create an organizational unit for this first activity. That's different, correct. That's just a reference to something. It's not a real folder. It doesn't actually contain anything. Well, yeah, it's a shared folder. It's not, yeah. Okay, I'll give it to you. I'll give that to you. It says that. But that's not what we're using for making, you know, real life folders. We're going to make an organizational unit. And we're going to make it very creative, and we're going to call it a test OU for test organizational unit. By default, it is protect the container from accidental deletion. And that's usually a good idea because if you accidentally delete it, it deletes the container and everything in it. So you can wipe out a department, a company, pretty easily. And they ask you to clear it, and I'm not sure why. Well, they are going to get rid of it later, but it's really easy just to click on it and then say unprotect and then delete. It'll just be like 2 steps later on instead of just 1. But right, so just be aware though that that's not a normal thing. You do not normally uncheck that. So leave it checked. But we're just going to follow the rules. Okay, now we have a new test organization. It's brand new. We know it's an organizational unit because there's a little directory icon under there. And I'm going to create a new user here. Just like I created blah, 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 blah. Okay, just like I created an organizational unit, I can create an a user. I still can't do it right. I create a user in my organizational unit. Right-click, new user. Not that difficult. Other options, by the way, is you can go to Actions, New User. I can right-click into the open space and do New User. I can click on the little button bar up here, create a new user. On the quiz, you'll have to know all the options of doing it. Just kidding. You don't have to do that. And you can do any of them. You will not get it wrong if you do it differently. You didn't right-click on the domain or the organizational unit. You clicked on the button. If you can create the user, that's all that matters. So create the new user, and we're going to call this user, his name is Test, otherwise known as Mr. User 1. Test User 1. Now that's just their name, so it'd be equivalent to Paul Benfield. What's their login going to be? Well, it could be, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It could be Benfield P. It could be Paul B. P. Paul dot Benfield. Whatever it's going to be called. So your login name is really independent of your first and last name. We are going to be using test user 1, though, as the user's login name. Test user 1. We click next, and we're going to give it a password of my password. We click next. We are on page 89, activity 3-4, step 7. And actually we're on step 8. Yes, it's going to keep the default of there. Now it comes up and says Windows cannot set the password for test user 1 because the password does not meet the policy requirement. See, policies are already kicking in before we even set them because there are default policies. Check the minimum password length, password complexity, and password history requirements. Now, that's actually what we're missing is the complexity. We have all lowercase, my password, and we don't have any numbers. So we have to go back and change it to be complex. And as mundane as password 01 is, that is actually complex enough. Capital PASSWORD 01, capital PASSWORD 01. And now it says, yes, the password needs to be changed to the next login, and click Finish. So I created my first user. I'm going to create a new group now. So I right-click on my test organizational unit, and I want to make a new group. And we're going to be calling it Test Group G. As you can see, the default scope is global, and the default group type is security. That's going to be the case in most cases, so we just leave it alone. But Test Group G is what we call it, and we click OK. Now, I want to add test user 1 to the group. I can do it two ways. I can go to the user, and I can do member of, and I can add it to a group. The second way is to go to the test user group, and I can see who the members are of this test group, and I can add the user this way as well. The book takes you through this way, so that's the way I'm going to take you as well. I click Add. I can just find the user. I can type in part of the name. I can't remember exactly what it is. I click Check Names, and it says, oh yeah, these are the people or things. These are the things that match that. And I want to choose test user 1 to be part of my group. And then I click OK, and OK again. And now it is a member of test group G. And I click OK. If I go to test user 1 and I look at members of right now, I can see that I'm part of the test group G. So either way, you can add them from the group or you can add it from the user. Either way. The only thing I changed, I created a test group and I created a user, and I made the user a member of the group. And it's kind of like, you know, an organization. So there's a, I don't know, a quilting club. Either the club can add you as a member, or you as a member can join the club. So really, the initiation can happen from either side. The user can join the club, or the club can add the user. Kind of a weak analogy. Now, right-clicking or clicking the little button for new user and typing this all in, you know, that can be kind of hard. So we want to learn an easier way and do it command line, because we love command line. We can do it this way through the graphical interface, but what fun is that? This is going to look way cooler. So I go to the Start menu and I type in command or command prompt. I want to get to the command prompt. And Let me make my window, well, it doesn't matter how big it is actually. And I'm going to use the DS for directory services add. I want to add a device to this, or I want to add, I'm sorry, not device, I want to add something to the directory services. And that thing that I want to add is a user. So I do DS add, and now I need to have some information about that user. So what are we going to call that user? Since it's like spaces, I'll need to use quotes. So the name of that user is going to be equal to test user 2. And where do I want to create this user? It's going to be in the organizational unit of test OU. And I can find the test OU on the domain controller of W2K8AD10. And we can't put the .com. It's actually, we actually do it this way to represent the domain controller. So we put the name, and then we do a comma, space, DC equals com after that. And I can close that. So that's who I'm going to create there. Now, I'm going to need to actually have a user login. So I need to use UPN, and that's going to be called testuser2 at W2K8AD10. And we have a SAM ID of testuser2. And then we have to list, if we want to fill in some of those fields in that user field for you, we can fill in the first name by doing -FN for first name, and the first name is test. And then we have -LN for the last name, which is user2. And we might as well set the password right away, so I'm going to do -PWD for password, and it's going to be PASSWORD01. And you know how we had to go back later and add that to the group, test group? We can add it right now. So I do a -member of, and now because there's some spaces in here, I need to put quotes around it. So I put the member of CN or common name, or I think it's common name, test group G. Where do I find test group G? I find it in the organizational unit called test OU, and that is on the domain controller W2K8AD10, and again the DC com equals com. So DS add user test user2 test OU W2K8AD10 DC com test user2 at W2K8AD10. SAM ID is test user2. First name is test. Last name is user2. Password is password01. Member of, and then CN equals test group G. OU test OU. DC WAD. Looks good. So I'll try that. DS add succeeded. It was added there. Let's check it out. I need to refresh the screen, so I can just hit F5. I now have a test user 2. Let's go to the test group, and I look at the members of the test group, and there is test user 2, just like magic. See, remember that all that clicking you had to do before, like right-click this and click and do all that? Here you don't have to click at all. All just one command line. You did all that.
Oh, nice.
No clicking here. If you made a mistake of some sort, leave the screen open, because if you leave the screen open, you can always hit the up arrow key and fix it. If you hit the up arrow key, then you can go back and fix whatever's wrong. The second thing you'll need to do is, if in fact something got messed up, or it said it couldn't add it to the group, or even if you just realize something is wrong, delete the user. So go up to test user 2, hit the X or just hit the delete key and delete the user test user 2. Otherwise, you know, especially if it created it but didn't completely create it, it's going to come back and say, oh, I can't even create this now because that object already exists. So go back and fix it. And you get a different error. So then you delete it, and then you hit enter, and you should get success. By the way, I'm really not that smart. I don't know these commands. I'm just copying it out of the book. This is step 2 in activity 3-5, and just copying it from there. So I'm just saying that, you know, you don't have to worry about the screen or write this down somewhere. I was just following the book. Let me take a look at yours and see what might be wrong. Okay. Obviously, yeah, there's less clicking involved, but a whole lot of typing. You know, you're not going to be creating users typically this way, but you can. Where you'll be using this, like it even says in the book, these steps might seem a lot of work to create a single user, but as you learn in Chapter 5, you can create several users at once, quickly and easily with command line tools and a text file. Microsoft has placed an increased emphasis on command line tools. So the DOS days were command line, really emphasizing going to a graphical user interface with icons, and right now they're actually going back. They're emphasizing switching from the graphical user interface to command line and doing more things, especially like it says right in the text with Server Core and the new PowerShell suite of tools. So there's a lot of things you can do with that you can't do with it as efficiently, really, in the GUI, especially if you're doing lots of these. Okay, other questions so far? We're good? Right now we only have 2 users, 1 group, 1 organizational unit, and we do have some built-in users and those kinds of things. But you know, if we really scale large, sometimes it can be hard to find the objects we're looking for. And that's the next activity, is 3-6, is locating objects in the Active Directory. Once you open up the Active Directory users and computers, which has still been open for all the rest of our activities, we're on page 92, by the way, we can right-click on the domain node in the left pane, so that includes all these different objects. And if I right-click on there, it's going to go find. It's kind of like doing a find within Windows Explorer. It's going from that level on down. So if I'm just looking for just a specific organizational unit, I can do that as well. But I want to find within the domain. And just for this example, it does say users, contacts, and groups. And I want to find anything that has test in it. If I click Find Now, it's going to show my test user, and test group. Once you have these in your list, you can, you know, interact with them. If I want to, like, oh yeah, test user 2, that's who I was looking for. I can double click on test user 2, and it brings up the actual properties of that. So I can double click on it, and it's going to bring up the properties of that user. I can cancel this, and I can, like, oh, I want to work with the test group, and so you can go back and forth for there. So it's kind of nice and convenient that way, especially if you think of you have hundreds or thousands of objects. You know, oh, it's Todd, but Todd who, you know, and it's going to find any reference to it. So even within the username or any of those other aspects. Later on, we're going to even be able to do it when we add keywords to an object that we can look for things. And that's pretty much it for activity 3.6. 3.7 is locating objects with Windows Explorer. There was an interesting situation this morning. There was one computer that didn't work properly to do this, so I hope that all of yours works. If I close everything, so I was just like, you know, clean computer, I go to Start, and I go to Network. Now, Network is an option that's on your menu right here. You should have this button up here that says Search Active Directory. Does everybody have that? So under Network, you do not have it. I don't have a solution for you. I do not know what causes that or does not cause that. It's just built in, so I don't know where it could have gone. It's not a huge deal. It's just showing that there's another way that you can access this stuff. That's all that's showing you. So instead of having to go through, start, administrative tools, Active Directory users and computers, is you can go right to the network area. And it works the exact same way. As soon as I click Search Active Directory, it brings up the exact same interface. This is exactly the same interface. No, for network discovery, that doesn't make any difference. It's the button that is either there or not working. Now this part I had some issues with. It says search active, okay, start network, search Active Directory, and the drop-down list. Now instead of looking for a user, I'm going to look for a computer. And in the role drop-down list that's displayed, click all Active Directory domain controllers. I don't see that. And that's what I seem to be missing. So I'm looking in the entire directory, or I can look in the domain, I suppose. Browse, maybe? No, that's not it. I don't see a drop-down. Does anybody have a drop-down for all active domain controllers? Do you? Or, oh, down here in the bottom. That's what I'm missing. Role, active. Never knew that. I don't typically use this search this way, so. Okay, I found it. I'm under Find Computer. So, okay, let me start all over again. You can click on Search Active Directory up on top. Let me even start back further. Okay. I can click on, I click on Start, and I click on Network. When you click on Network, you should have this option up on top for Search Active Directory. One person this morning did not have it, and one person this afternoon does not have it, and I cannot explain why not. I don't know how to turn it on. There is no special click to do it. It's supposed to just be there. Oh, Search Active Directory? Also, let me try it that way too. Start, Administrative Tools, Search. No, I don't see it there. Once you click on this, this brings up the exact same dialog as you got when we were looking for that user test user. So in this time, except in this time, we don't want to do the test user. We want to be looking for a computer. So I click on computers, and then now this is a new dialog list role that came up in the bottom that I missed before. So I click on here, and I want to only see the domain controller, Active Directory domain controllers in the entire directory. And as soon as I do that, I click Find, and there it pops up. If I had 5 of them, they would pop up. So that's how that would work. If you wanted a different role, if it's a workstation or a server, and I do a Find Now, I don't have any. So the only computers that are actually out there are Active Directory domain servers. That's one way you can look for it. You can do the same thing with users, though, from here. If I check for test, just like I did before, it brings up my test users. So it's just 2 different ways of getting to the same location. If you don't have that button, not a problem. Just go ahead and use the Search Active Directory under Administrative Tools and then Active Directory Users and Computers. And I can click Find on here and be able to find people, just the Active Directory users. So it's 2 different ways of getting the same way. They're just showing it to you. Just like everything in Windows and Windows Server, there's multiple ways to get to the same place. So don't be too upset if it's not under there. The next activity is 3-8. 3-8, publishing a shared folder in Active Directory. This is actually going to do 2 different features. One is we're going to be creating a shared folder, a very simple shared folder, but the main, which should not be necessarily new to you, but the publishing it in Active Directory would be. So you can take a shared folder and you're going to put it out in Active Directory so people can find it more easily. And you can sort of keep track of that way. So to do this, I don't need anything running right now, but I'm going to go to my C drive, so Start Computer, And I can go to my C drive. And once in my C drive, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it test share is what the book says. I'm on page 94 on step 3. I'm creating a test share. Very easily, I'm just going to click on share up on top. And again, there's multiple ways of doing this. I'm just following the steps. You don't have share either. It just showed up. Fantastic. Click on it before it goes away. This is simple file sharing. This is this isn't the complicated part. Well, neither part is really. As long as you have the button. And we just want to say that we want to share this with everyone. We will definitely be getting into more security. We typically do not just randomly share files with everyone. But, you know, again, this is not the main part. Oh, the nickname under there and it's showing up? Okay. So I'm clicking under everyone, and I want to add everyone. Make sure you click the add button. So administrator and then everyone. And they're by default just a reader, which means that they can only read the stuff and not change anything in that share, which is all I need to do because that's not the most important part. I click share. That's actually sharing it. And that's the name of it. Your folder is shared now. And it's going to be called //server10 /test share is the path to it. And I'm done. And it shows that it's shared because there's a little picture by it. Okay, now the part that we're publishing the share in Active Directory, we're going to go, we can close this up, and we can go to Computer Management. So Start, Administrative Tools, and then Computer Management. And if you're familiar with Computer Management at all, it has a shared folders list on the left-hand side, like the 5th item down, shared folders. If I double-click on them, it says what shares do I have, and it's the shares that I want to look at. And there's my share, test share. What am I sharing? I'm sharing the test share directory in my root of my C, and I don't have anybody connected to it. The share name, let me bring this over here, is called test share. If I right-click on this share, I can go to properties. Nope, hang on. Let me read this again. Yeah, that's right. Click on properties, and I have a publish tab up on top. I'm taking it, and I'm going to publish this share in Active Directory. And the path to the share doesn't change. In fact, I can't change it. It's just telling you what it's going to be. It's //server10 /test share. Now we can call it what we want to do, whatever we want to make it sort of descriptive. And yes, in step 11, it's having us say it is a share to test publishing in Active Directory. A share to test publishing in Active Directory. I don't care about the owner. In addition to that, we have this keyword section down here. Remember, objects can have keywords for searching. If I click edit on here, I can just type in, this is going to be for testing. So I click add for testing. Actually, I type testing and then click add. And then I click OK. So it's going to add the keyword testing to there. And then I click OK. So everybody get that? To start looking again, if I right-click on the share, go to Properties, I want to publish it in Active Directory. I gave it a name. Oh, I'm sorry, I gave it a description. And then under the keywords, I edited and added the word testing to the keyword list. Okay, Now where this would become in handy is, so now I have nothing on my computer and I want to find that share in Active Directory. I can click on Start and go back to Network again. For those of you who have Search Active Directory button, you can do this. And you can click on here and then you can find something. So under the Find, what do I want to find? I want to find some shared folders. You know, where is that shared folder? I just can't remember. So I click on Shared Folders, and I'm looking in the entire directory, and it has something to do with testing. So I'm just going to type test in there, and then I click Find Now. Oh yeah, that's what it's called. It's called Test Share, and that's where it's located. And so it actually triggered because of the name and the keyword. If I typed in testing, it didn't find the keyword. Where's my keyword? Advanced. Yeah, test. It should have found testing because of the keyword, though. Oh, yeah, where it says keyword. Right on. Testing for keywords. Thank you. And it found it because of the keyword. Thank you. Sometimes you miss the obvious. So there's a couple ways of searching for that. If I right-click on here now, I can explore this. It's kind of like when I was working with the objects before. I can interact with these things. So just the finding just doesn't like end there. It's now I can explore this. So this is the actual folder that I created, that test share folder on my server 10, which is really on my C drive, and so it does exist in one location. Close all the open windows. And okay, I'm going to close all the open windows. What's the next step here? Open Active Directory users and computers. Administrative tools. Active Directory users and computers. When you publish a shared folder by using the computer management, the published shared appears as a child object of the server on which the share is located. Unfortunately, it's not on by default. So if I go to my domain and I know it's on my domain controller server and I see this server here, you know, there's just nothing underneath there that I'm working with. If I go under View, I can see the users, contacts, groups, and computers as containers. So if I check this box, now if I go under Domain Controllers, I have a server, and under the server I can see the share. So all the shares, if I had 50 shares, they'd all show up under here. It's not on by default though. You have to turn that on to see what those shares are going to be. So it has you take a look at that, and then just to put things back to the default standard view, go back under View, and then uncheck that of seeing the computers as containers. So you don't get to see those shares there. And again, 20 ways to skin a cat. It's going to be most often you're going to be looking at shares under computer management, under the shares. At least that's what I'm familiar with doing most often. Group policies. All those things that allowed us or disallowed us to log in, or password restrictions, or limiting what we can do or forcing us to do other things, is all based on group policies. We have two activities left, 3.9 and 3.10. The first activity is working with just exploring group policies. And I actually had a really hard time following these, just as they're just trying to show some aspects of it. So I'm not even going to follow the book right now. But if you take a look at some group policies, we use the Group Policy Management tool. So we can close the Active Directory users and computers, and we can go to Start, Administrative Tools, and then Group Policy Management. And again, all this activity is just trying to show you some aspects of it. You're not changing anything. You're just looking at a couple things. It's a new icon. It's a forest. It is because the forest is, made up of trees and domains and all that stuff. If I click on the left pane to expand the forest and domains nodes. I'm going to look for my domain under domains, and there's my domain. If you click on the default domain policy on the right-hand side here, read the message. Don't show this message again. So what am I doing? Double-clicking on this. It says you have selected a link to the group policy object, except for changes to link properties. Changes you make here will impact all the other locations where the GPO is linked. So I'm just going to click OK. In the right pane, if I click on scope, and actually I'm on the scope, it's telling me what this is linked to. And so it's linked to the whole domain, and everything else is going to be filtered down from there. So any child domains or any children domains that I have underneath there are going to get this impact as well. If I have multiple domains, those two tree type things, it does not scale over to there. The scope is only for this domain, and you can change it to the entire forest, so it does apply to everybody. Or you can change it to just a subdomain if you had the children domain underneath there. So the scope tells you what it applies to. On the next page, on page 100, if I click on the domain policy, click on settings up on top, and then once you're in settings, this tells you exactly what's actually going on. And I guess I'll close that. So these are the things that are taking effect. So under the account policies, password policy, it's going to enforce a password history. So it's going to remember the last 24 passwords. So if you keep switching your password between dog, cat, it won't let you do that. You'll have to be more creative, like cat1, cat2, cat3, and so forth. Maximum password age, which means it's going to expire in that time, is every 42 days. Why 42? I'm not sure. But you can change that to 90, 180, 360, never, whatever it's going to be. Minimum password age is 1 day. So if you change your password today, you can't change it again until tomorrow. And again, I'm not sure exactly why. It has to be at least 7 characters long, and it must meet complexity requirements. And store passwords using reversible encryption is actually disabled, so it's not even allowing you to do that. It's just showing you this. All the different things that apply to here. Network access, allow anonymous, and disabled. Network security, do not store LAN, manage your hash values on next password change, because that's what people hack. Certificates and so forth. And so that's part of the computer configuration. So every computer that is part of this domain is going to have this enforced. You also have user configurations, and there are no settings at this point, but they apply to the individual user. So the difference is if this computer is in that domain, those things would take effect to it no matter who logs in. A user configuration would be, it applies to me as a user wherever I log in. So you kind of get the different sides of that. So do you want it to apply to the user or to the specific machine? And that depends on what you're trying to do, and that will be done in multiple chapters in the future about group policies. We're just introducing them to you today. And that does have you go through and take a look at, let's see here, show all link, default, show. Under settings, I'm looking at all those. Scroll through the settings and look at the default policies. Most pertain to user rights assignments, such as which users are allowed to log on. The default domain policy in the left pane, default domain policy right here in the left pane. If I click edit, you can see that there's a lot of items underneath there. So if I start on computer, there's two areas, computer configuration and then user configuration. And then we have policies, which have to take effect. And then you have procedures, which are, preferences, which are preferences, but can be changed. Policies are enforced. Preferences are just sort of like defaults. Under computer configuration, look at policies. And then we have Windows settings under policies. And underneath there are security settings. So if I look at security settings, these are different things. Click to expand the account policies node. So if I double click on this, you can see a couple policies that are underneath there. So it's very hierarchical. I kind of equate this to the registry. I don't think that anybody in the world knows all the features and functions in here. There's bits and pieces, and you always get good reference material, and everybody has opinion on what the best settings are. And there are good reference materials that say you should look at this, or if you want to do this type of security, look for these settings. Many times you'll be told, though, go to this setting, this subsetting, this category, change this value to yes. And so it's kind of directed a lot of times. If you play with it, look around enough, you kind of get an idea of what these are. And they do give good descriptions as far as what they will impact. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. So if you're looking at this like, oh my word, how am I going to memorize this? Don't worry about it. There's a couple key ones that you're going to end up running into, but other than that, use reference material. Okay, account policies. Explore the settings in this node. And nodes under it. By default, the account policies are defined only by the default policy and so forth. Click to expand the local policies. Here's local policies. Here's a couple more things. And let me go back. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Under account policies, I have a password policy, which if I click on it, it brings up the password policies. So, I'm like going deeper and deeper. And this is where it says enforce a password history of 24. If I double click on it, I can change it. Or I don't have to define a policy for this user. Don't change anything here. We're just looking. We're on a field trip. We're not taking any changes yet. We will make a couple changes in the next activity though. So, account lockout policy, again, it's not defined. By the way, we're going to find a lot of items as not defined. Hundreds and hundreds of items not defined, which just means that they haven't been configured. So account lockout, I can enable or disable explicitly, or I can give it a value, or just not do anything with it. And then other things take precedence. If I go to local policies, I look at local policies. Look at any of these users' rights assignments. There you go. There's a nice list for you. Profile single processes. What? Well, there's always the explain button up on top. This security setting determines which users can use performance monitoring tools to monitor the performance of non-system processes. The default is just administrators. But if you look, it's, nothing's done with it, so it's not even defined. So nothing's done with it. And you could go through all of these. Here's security options: auditing, devices, domain, interactive login, network access, user accounts, system objects, recovery console, shutdown. Here you go. Allows system to be shut down without having to log on. Do you ever hate that when you get to a computer screen and you have no shutdown button? You actually have to log on to the computer in order to shut it down? Well, that's a policy. And you could define the policy by saying, yes, you have to do that, or no, you don't have to do that. And right now it's not defined. And you can go on and on and on. So that's kind of the idea of the area, and you can look at this underneath. Even user configuration. Here's user policies, Windows settings, security settings, software restrictions. I guess there are none right now. Public keys policies. And again, this is where having some kind of reference material, trying to do something specific. I don't want people to use their CD-ROM drives. You can do that in here. You have to define where it is and disable them from using a CD-ROM drive. I don't want people to have the start button or the recycle bin or whatever, or I only want them to have certain things in the control panel. And that's one thing that we get to work with in the next activity, which is 3-10, and then we'll be done. Working with group policies in exercise 310. Um, we'll keep this open. Well, actually, I'm going to close it. Start the activity from scratch. In this activity 3-10, we want to go back to the Group Policy Management tool. So I go to Start, Administrative Tools, and Group Policy Management. Kind of close those things up a little bit. I ultimately want to find my test organizational unit. So I want to create a group policy just for that organizational unit. So that'll be the scope of it. So it's not going to be the entire domain or the entire forest. It's only for that organizational unit. So I open up my domain, and right there is my test organizational unit. If I right-click on it, my very first option is to create a group policy object in this domain and link it here. So it's going to create the object in that container, but then also make the links back to it. Make it very simple. We're going to call the group policy object test OU GPO. So it's the group policy object or GPO for my test OU. And then I click OK. Now if I click the little plus next to test OU, I'll have my policy, my group policy object over here. By the way, this is a typo in the book. It says in the left pane, click on test OU GPO. Well, you can ultimately get underneath there, but they want you to open up the test OU first. Then you can click on over here on the right-hand side to edit the test OU GPO. So either way, you can edit it. It's just you have to open up the organizational unit first before you can get to it. And now this is your policy management editor. This is what you want them to do or not to be able to do. And right now, it's not configured for anything. We have a default policy created on our network, but this is empty right now. So anything that we define is actually completely new. Okay, the things we want to do is under the user configuration, so that's this bottom half here, user configuration, we go to policies. And then under policies, we want to go to administrative templates. Under administrative templates, we have a control panel item up on top. And if you double click on it, you have more options. And one of them says prohibit access to the control panel. Now this is one thing that I don't necessarily like about the policies, is that the way that they word the policies. Some policies are in the affirmative and some are in the opposite of affirmative. Negative, I guess. Shannon, if you click one way, you get one screen. If you click one way, you get the other screen. And so if I click on the left-hand side under Test OU GPO, it actually brings up, the Test OU GPO scope, details, settings, that kind of stuff. I don't really want to be there. So on the left-hand side, if I right-click and then edit, I can do that. Or I click on the Test OU, and then on the right-hand side, I right-click and edit. So kind of either way. Wherever you see the name Test OU GPO, right-click on it. And then click Edit. Okay, going back under User Configuration and then Policies. I'm under Policies. And I'm under Windows Settings. I'm not to figure out where I am. Yes, okay, Administrative Templates. That's where I want to be. And then under Control Panel. This what I was talking about is that just the way that some of these policies are listed, they'll actually say deny or allow something. So I want to allow you to do this. Well, those are easy because when you go into them, I want to allow that, so I enable it, or I don't want to allow that, so I disable it. This is actually backwards. This actually says prohibit the access. So it's kind of the opposite. So I'm enabling the prohibition of accessing the control panel. So I am saying, yes, I agree, you can't do that. Do you know what I'm saying? Well, and why can't it just say allow access to the control panel? I want to enable access the control panel, or I want to disable access the control panel, it is actually the opposite. I want to enable the feature that prohibits you from accessing the control panel. Got it? Or access the control panel. Enabled, disabled. So just be aware of the wording on some of them that you might be doing like a double negative, like, no, I'm disabling that you can't access it. How does that work? Yeah. Correct. And if you didn't, and what's really nice though is that these explanations are pretty good, very good in fact. Like this one's a really good one. It says this setting, as you would expect, prevents the control.exe from running. As a result, the user cannot start the control panel or run any control panel items. In addition, this setting also removes the control panel from the start menu. This setting also removes the control panel folder from Windows Explorer. So it does more than just like gives you an error when you click on it. It removes it from several places from view. If there's still some leftover things, which we're actually going to play with later on, like personalize your desktop, which is really a control panel feature, it's going to then tell you a message that it can't do it. But it's going to remove a lot of features, of normal ways of accessing it. So again, we're going to enable the prohibit access to the control panel and click OK. Okay, we're going to log in. We're going to try to log in somebody else, and we're going to find out another issue, actually. We'll come back into here, but we'll go through and follow the steps in the book. In step 11, it says that we should log off. So log off. And we're going to log in as user 1, test user 1. So do Control-Alt-Insert. I'm going to switch users. And I click on other user, and then I type in test user 1. Password is capital PASSWORD01. And I click the little arrow to the right to log in, and it says the user's password must be changed before logging in because there was a checkbox when I created it to change the password to the next login. So it goes through that, and we're going to call it capital PASSWORD02. Just like the real users do, right? PASSWORD02. Now I click login, and my password's been changed. Yay, it's been done, and I can't log in. Oh, you cannot log on because the login method you're using is not allowed on this computer. Please see your network administrator for more information. Now, if you're the network administrator, you're like, what? What did I do? So some research would be very valuable. What ends up being this issue is that, remember, this is a server, and we're not allowing normal users to log onto the server. We want only administrators to log onto the server. Do you want, somebody just to log on to like type the report and play solitaire or something like that? No. So they cannot physically log onto the server, this physical box. It doesn't mean they can't log into the Active Directory. So if they're on a different computer in the network, test user 1 will be fine. It's logging into this specific computer that they're not allowed to do. And that is done at the default domain policy. So we want to change it. So we want to switch user, go back to administrator, and log back in, capital PASSWORD01. And we want to change that in the default domain controllers policy. So I'm just going to close the server manager. And I want to go back to administrative tools and the group policy management. It's going to be under domain controllers. So I look under domain controllers, and I have a default domain controllers policy. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean the default domain policy. It's the default domain controllers policy that we're actually changing. So any server that's part of the default domain controllers policy will have this policy, such as don't let anybody log into me unless you're an administrator. So I'm going to right-click on here and click on Edit. So now I'm able to edit this configuration for this policy. If we go under the computer section and under policies, and again, policies are enforced, we have a Windows setting, and then we have security settings under Windows. Under security settings, we have local policies. And under local policies, we have users' rights. We have a long list of things. So, everybody get that far? I know it's a lot of steps in there. And the book doesn't necessarily make it easy to get through. The book is correct. It just may not be easy to get through all this, but we're at this step. And because I'm a domain controller, I'm an important machine, I'm not allowing who's allowed to log on locally. That means like at the physical machine, who's allowed to log on locally. If I double click on it, the account operators, the administrators, backup operators, print operators, and server operators, they can log on. Well, test user 1, he's just a normal user. So we could do two different things. One is get rid of the policy or add his group to the policy, and that's what we're going to be doing. So we want to add domain users to the policy. So we click on Add User or Group, and we can type that in or browse. We'll browse for it. And I just like typing in like domain. Type in domain, and then click on Check Names. What's nice about this is that I don't have to type the whole thing in, and then it gets me the right spelling, so I don't spell things wrong. So I want the domain users group. Well, fortunately, these are all groups, so I just have to look for domain users group. That's the one I want. I click on it, and then I click OK. And then I click OK again. And I click OK again. So it's going to add the domain users group to this policy. So now if I'm part of that domain, if I'm part of the domain users group, I can log onto this machine locally. So let's try it out. Let's click OK here. If you click OK, that's going to apply. Anytime you click OK, it automatically applies. You don't have to click Apply and then OK. It's not a bad habit to get into, but it just sort of does it. So I'm thinking that's going to work, so let's try it out. Log off again. Control-Alt-Insert. Switch the user. Other user. Test user 1. PASSWORD 02. Remember, you changed it already? Oh, this takes forever. This is another complaint, personal gripe I have with the Active Directory. It takes forever to synchronize and do whatever it's doing. I have one server, two users. Not sure what it needs to do, but this literally takes probably 5 minutes. So hang out, wait for the change to take effect. So PASSWORD 02, still can't, and you know, this morning it did take a good 3, 4, possibly 5 minutes. So pack up the rest of your stuff if you want to, if you need to head out. But go ahead and keep the machine up, give it a few minutes, and then once you successfully log in, that'll be the last thing required for today. I do not have Learning Plan 5 up there yet. Hopefully I will tonight or tomorrow. For next week, there is no homework for next week. Please just read Chapter 4. We will be getting into, I'm not sure if we're going to be doing review questions in the future, so skip them for next week for Chapter 4. We'll be getting into Active Directory design and security concepts, so we work more with organizational units. viewing object permissions, permission inheritance, and how that all flows down. So we get a little bit deeper into the structure itself and management of it. Let me try logging in again. But please just read through it and be familiar with it. You don't have to worry about doing review questions. Still can't log in. Try again. Let's try again. Oh, still can't. Make sure I do spell things right. Test user 1. PASWRD02. Still can't. It certainly would not hurt taking a snapshot after this, because then you know you have the users, you have all the policies and that kind of stuff. So you have like a post chapter 3 as well. Realize that when you'll also have a pre-chapter 4, which are really the same. So you can do pre-chapter 4 or post, or do them both. What's nice about doing a post-chapter snapshot is you can go back to the pre-chapter 3 snapshot and you do through it. You're halfway through Active Directory. It's just like, oh, I really want to do this. Well, now you have nothing to come back to do like chapter 4 stuff. So then you can go to the post chapter 3 and then start from there. So it has your users, it has the passwords, it has the policies for there. So it never hurts to have more snapshots. You can always get rid of them. Oops. There we go. Mine's working. Oh, yes. That was actually the last step. Sorry. That's the whole point, is if you look at the Start menu, I go to Start, I have no control panel. Because that was the whole point of the first policy, is remove the control panel. We don't want people to be able to change things, do we? No, we might not want to. So it's gone, and I can go to Personalize, and it says, this operation has been canceled due to restrictions. Please contact your system administrator. So trying to log off. I can log off, but I can't shut down. That was another policy that was in there. You know, who can shut down the local server? That's a domain controller policy again. You just don't want a normal user to log on to your domain controller and shut it down. So in order to shut it down, you actually need to be the administrator. But you could change that. Find the group policy object item for that and change it. Or log in as administrator. And logs in, and it brings up Server Manager because I am administrator. And now I can shut down. Once again, when it shuts down, you have to have a reason to shut down. You can't just shut down because you want to. You have to have a reason. And it better be good. It evaluates the reason and says, nope, not good enough reason. I put a space. Inclement weather. Multiple spontaneous errors. Stopping on the services. You can take snapshots at any point. It's just much cleaner and neater and actually more efficient if you do it while the machine is down. So now that it's down, I can go to VM, snapshot, take a snapshot, post chapter 3.